Christ exposes the demon's state, its accomplices and its victims. Given by revelation through his instrument Gabriel, Verberg. 1993. Table of Contents. Preface. Christ, the Redeemer of all souls and men, is revealed. Who or what are demons? Who supplies their energy? Who are their accomplices and victims? Why Christ can expose today the activity of the demons. The head of the serpent will be crushed. The all-principle sending and receiving in the ongoing events of creation and the communication in the divine world. The satanic principle, divide, bind and rule, the reversal of the all-principle, the demon's state and its energy suppliers, its accomplices and victims. No sending without receiving, the development of the fall realms and of the causal law. Thought and language, substitutes for the loss of spiritual communication. The craving to dominate by way of the demon's state knows no limits. The basic rules of the demons, of their accomplices and victims. The effects of the demonic satanic principle divide, bind and rule. The energy suppliers, the 7 laws or principles of the demon's state. The first demonic principle, create disorder, noise, structures of power and outer forms. The second demonic principle, promote self-will and discord among the people. The arrangement of the fall realms. The third demonic principle, forget ethical principles, strive for knowledge, make the earth subject to you. One cannot study God. The fourth demonic principle, be unyielding, keep the upper hand, defend your ego with stubbornness. The fifth demonic principle, be discontent, stay hectic, drive yourself and others to overactivity, see the bad side of your fellow man, the intensified irradiation of the primordial central sun, an act of grace of God. The sixth demonic principle, self-love brings happiness. The seventh demonic principle, be without mercy, kill and murder for your rights, the one who keeps his right is stronger. Christ alone leads soul and man out of the law of sowing and reaping and out of the clutches of the adversary. A thought for each day from Brother Emmanuel. Some examples of the reversal of the divine principles into the satanic demonic principles. Appendix. Christ, the Redeemer of all souls and men, is revealed. I am Christ, the Redeemer of all souls and men and the ruler of the kingdom of God on earth. I am being revealed through my instrument, the prophetess and spiritual ambassadress of God. I, Christ, in God, my Father and yours, have sent to mankind this high spirit being from the heavens, so that she may live as a human being among people and, as my instrument, announce to mankind the salvation, which I am, Christ. The I am, my word through my instrument, now radiates into the whole world in word and in writing. During the past years on earth and through my instrument, I, Christ, have revealed the structure of the heavens and of the spiritual body, the soul. I, Christ, have also revealed the fall event and the inner path, the path out of the depths of the human ego and back to the heights of the eternal I am. Through my instrument, I, Christ, have called into being the community of the inner being. It has neither priests nor leaders nor dogmas, nor does it know cults, rites or ceremonies. In the revelations which I, Christ, have been giving during many earthly years through my instrument, I have instructed people about the law of sowing and reaping. I founded the home-bringing mission of Jesus Christ, which became the foundation of universal life. From this root, the home-bringing mission of Jesus Christ, the inner path radiates and flows into universal life. People in universal life have received not only the divine teachings and instructions for finding their way out of the law of banishment, the binding law of cause and effect, but also for how they can return to the absolute law, to their home. And the law, pray and work is a criterion for daily life in universal life. I, Christ, will bring all people home through their actualization of the laws of God. These are taught in all detail by my instrument, the prophetess and spiritual ambassadress of God, since her soul lives in the law of the eternal, from which she draws and gives. In the home-bringing mission of Jesus Christ, I, Christ, taught the fundamental truths which man needs as a spiritual tool for the path to the inner life. In universal life, I, Christ, now give the teachings and instructions which show how the eternal law above all, the Sermon on the Mount, can be applied in a practical way in everyday life. All those who are willing to be brought home by me grow into universal life and find their home there. Universal life is the basis for the kingdom of peace of Jesus Christ, the kingdom of God on earth. In the words of the world, it is also called the 1,000-year kingdom of God. Through my instrument in universal life, I, Christ, am giving rise to original communities and, in God, my eternal Father, I have founded the covenant community New Jerusalem. God, the Eternal, the Most High, made the covenant for the kingdom of God on earth with the members of the original community New Jerusalem. Through this covenant with the Eternal, the community became the covenant community New Jerusalem, in the New Israel, in the becoming kingdom of God on earth. In this community, I, Christ, gather the sons and daughters of God who are in his mission. They are descended from the lineage of David and from other lineages, too. Many beings and people are in the mission of God, in my work of redemption, to found and build, in and with me, the kingdom of peace, the kingdom of God on earth, as true disciples, men and women. Who or what are demons? Who supplies their energy? Who are their accomplices and victims? It is written that the demonic and satanic will be bound for 1,000 years, during the time of the kingdom of peace. After this time, the dark, the demonic, will once again flare up and attempt to establish the territory of the darkness on earth for the last time. But the demons and their accomplices will not be successful in completely reconquering the earth. Their attempt will be pitiful, because they will not find enough victims, that is, imitators who blindly do what the demons want. An explanation: the demonic is what comes from the demon's state. The satanic is what has a negative effect on the senses and on the sensations, thoughts, words and actions of people. Who are the demons? Demons are fallen angels, adherents to the first female angel, who, primarily after her capitulation, drew together and established their demon state in one area of the universe. The first female angel was the first one who wanted to be like God, later attempting to place herself above God. She capitulated after the sacrifice on Golgotha. The demon state acts solely through the energy of those people who sin against the laws of God, people who harbor envy and hatred against their neighbor, who live in strife and enmity with them, who seek admiration, prestige and personal possessions, who indulge in their lusts, who transmit spitefulness and trigger wars. All this creates negative energies, and each person who sins against the laws of God thus becomes an energy supplier for the demons. Thus, it is people who supply the negative energies with which the demons operate on earth in order to entice more and more people to become energy suppliers. For this reason, many demons do not incarnate, because they receive enough energy from their energy suppliers to be able to catapult themselves again and again out of a radiation sphere which would lead them into incarnation, for as human beings, they, too, would have to endure and suffer what they inflicted upon their souls. When man enables the demons to do this, he sins, for many people know the 10 Commandments and the laws of inner life. This means that they sin despite knowing better. The soul is in the earthly garment in order to recognize itself and to transform its human aspects. The soul is not on earth to increase the non-divine, thus supplying energy to the demons, its gods, so that these can restore and strengthen themselves, leading ever more people astray and maintaining their demonic hierarchy. With the negative energies of people, the demons have established a downward hierarchy for themselves. They have provided themselves with accomplices and victims. The accomplices are those people who have attained external power and prestige and unscrupulously dominate other people, using their power and influence to exploit many people and bind them to themselves. The person who lets himself be bound, that is, who does what the supposed patriarch, the accomplice, wants, becomes a victim. Many of these accomplices sit among the highest ranks of governments, church institutions, of science and economy, and of big business. Every person who strives for power and prestige, who creates riches for himself in order to aggrandize himself and broaden and maintain his position of power, gives proof of who he is. Also, the one who exploits his neighbor or uses violence against those who do not serve downwards bears witness of himself. And so, he who serves the one who I, Christ, am not, becomes the victim. May the one who has eyes to see, see, may the one who has ears to hear, hear. The one who is alert recognizes the accomplice and also recognizes his victims. These blindly serve the accomplice in order to also receive crumbs from the big cake earth, which the demonic accomplices have divided among themselves. An alert person sees behind the mask, which consists of pretense, sanctimoniousness, humbleness or loyalty. Each one speaks himself. Each one shows his own fruit and the alert one recognizes it. The person who does not let himself be caught, that is, who does not serve downwards and does not step on the people who seem to be lower, recognizes all those who serve the one who I, Christ, am not, even though they use my name, Christ, as a guise, taking it in vain. Therefore, the victims are all those who imitate the accomplices in what they show of themselves, who want to climb the hierarchical ladder, going forward ruthlessly in order to cut a piece from the large cake earth and keep it for themselves, as their own personal belonging, and in order to be respected, to be noticed and attain outer esteem, perhaps with honors and titles. These are the victims. Victims are also the imitators who want to live like those in the highest ranks, who are looked up to, respected and esteemed. The victims, often beyond their earthly standing, imitate what the accomplices show them. Likewise, they seek pleasure, wanting to indulge in physical pleasures, like their past and present examples among the rich with their beautiful women, their slaves. They want the killing of animals and do not shy away from the killing of people. Those who do all this are the victims. Why Christ can expose today the activity of the demons. Through my instrument I, Christ, now teach the absolute law, the living in the Spirit of God, so that the demons and their accomplices are exposed more and more quickly and are listened to less and less by their victims. At the same time, I, Christ, now uncover the principle by which the adversary entices people, making of them his tools and prisoners and keeping them as his energy suppliers. As Jesus of Nazareth, I taught the laws of God. Beyond this, I wanted to teach the divine all principle, the application of the law of God. I instructed the people in this, so that they would find their way to the fulfillment of the law of God, to the being, consciously becoming again children of the Eternal. As Jesus, I, the Christ, taught about the being and I lived in the being. However, I could not teach the many aspects and the all-embracing application of the eternal all principle. This was no longer possible to me, because of the guilt of many of the people and the failure of the Jewish people. This is why I spoke to my own in the following sense: I cannot yet tell you everything today, for you cannot yet bear it. But when the Spirit of truth comes, he will lead you into all truth. John 16:12. The Spirit of truth is the Spirit of the Christ of God, which is active through his instrument in order to fulfill what I announced as Jesus of Nazareth, I, Christ, am the Spirit of truth which leads you into all truth. Recognize, God is a just God. As long as God, the Eternal, could not yet teach his absolute law in a comprehensive way, it is the all-principle, the giving and the receiving principle which is also called sending and receiving. He did not uncover the intrigues of the darkness in a comprehensive way either. Ever since my life on earth as Jesus of Nazareth, a soul has not been in an earthly garment whose consciousness was high enough for these highest teachings, not even in the many enlightened men and women, nor in the prophets, of the past 2000 years. Many of them gave general divine principles and teachings. Divine revelations, too, were given to mankind. However, the profound all-wisdoms were not given, because only those souls which live in the being are able to immerse themselves in the depths of the ocean, God, in the omnipotence of the Eternal. God, the Eternal, and I, his Son, prepared the great universal star. It was revealed that this universal star would appear in the firmament during the mighty turn of time from the old sinful world to the era of the Spirit. It is the prophetess and spiritual ambassadress of God, the High Spirit being before the Father's throne. She was destined for this mighty turn of time, in order to proclaim the all-being to the world and to found and build with others the kingdom of peace of Jesus Christ with its divine laws. Because the soul of my instrument lives in the omnipotence of God, I, Christ, am able to reveal the all-being, the eternal principle, the highest teaching which could ever be revealed or drawn and given by the high consciousness of a soul in an earthly garment. The human being, my prophetess, the spiritual ambassadress of God, also draws and teaches from her opened spiritual consciousness, from her innermost being, which is one with God. It is the absolute law which comes from the depths of being, and she explains it in so far as it can be conveyed in human words and terms. God is just, even towards the demons, for they, too, are his children, and through me, Christ, will be led into the land of love, since they, too, bear the Redeemer spark. As long as God, the Eternal, could not yet teach and explain in detail his all-law, his all-principle, giving and receiving, also called sending and receiving, he, the Eternal, did not uncover in detail the methods and intrigues of the adversary who has and is still abusing the divine all-principle of giving and receiving for his purposes. This abuse of the highest principle is gradually coming to an end, for when it is uncovered, it will not be covered up again, but dissolved. I, Christ, now expose and unmask the work of the demons and their accomplices, through my instrument. The head of the serpent will be crushed. The call of Christ rings out, demon, your hour and the hour of your accomplices has come. The woman mentioned in the Apocalypse, which has been known to Christianity for almost 2000 years, is active as a human being among human beings in the present time. The High Spirit being in earthly garment, surrounded by the hosts of God headed by the bearer of divine will, called Michael on earth, will, with the messengers of God, crush the serpent's head on earth as well as in the spheres of purification. The demon's state and its accomplices are in great turmoil. They sense that their hour is near. With all possible demonic methods and satanic means, they have been after the woman's earthly life, so that their methods of enticement would not be exposed. It is too late. The woman is surrounded and protected by legions of the messengers of God, headed by the cherub of divine will, Michael. With me, Christ, she will expose the principle of enticement of the adversary and, with the messengers of God, will liberate the willing souls and people from being captives of the satanic. In the Spirit of God, the All-One, the power of the darkness is already broken. Its accomplices, the tools and worshippers of the darkness, are falling victim to the effects of their causes more and more. Thus, they have less and less strength to satisfy the demands of the demons, to entice people and make of them dependents, slaves, yes men and energy donors. I repeat, the head of the serpent will be crushed. Before this happens, the insatiable and artificial animal will be unmasked. The all-principle sending and receiving in the ongoing events of creation and the communication in the divine world. Recognize and understand that the eternal principle, God, is the giving and receiving selfless love. In God all beings are equal. He, the Great All-One, makes no differences. All of his children are one great family in him, the Father Mother God. The All-One never keeps anything for himself. Therefore, God is also the impersonal life. The Eternal Father, who at the same time is the mother of his children, has given all of infinity as heritage to each child by taking the essence from the whole and forming it into a spirit body. Thus, every spirit body consists of all the substances and forces of infinity and at the same time lives in the flowing stream of infinity. All beings in God are therefore heirs of infinity, to whom all that exists belongs, for all is contained in all things. Thus, every being in God is the all-bearing life, the essence of the great whole, and every being in God lives in the fullness, it gives and sends from the fullness, and receives from the fullness. Since it lives in the fullness, it need not be concerned for itself nor claim anything. It possesses everything that is, all being as essence. The beings in God have different abilities and talents. These correspond to the mentality of the spirit being and its origin. For instance, in one spirit being, the mentality from the basic ray of order is more pronounced. With this mentality as well as its abilities and talents, it is active for the great whole. Other spirit beings in God have a more pronounced basic radiation of will or wisdom or earnestness or patience or love or mercy, and work accordingly for the great whole. It is an absolute lawful working together of all beings in God. No being is favored. All beings are equal before the face of God. Each being is the all-bearing life and is active in the life, in God. It beholds all things and events within itself, it is active in the law of the all and speaks the language of the all-law, the language of selfless love. It has no secrets. It is the being, all in all things. Nor does it need to inquire about the primordial source, it lives in the primordial source, in God. And so, it lives in the eternal stream, in God, and is at the same time the condensed eternal stream, the all that has become form, the spirit being. It is the eternal principle giving and receiving, also called sending and receiving. For a deeper understanding, I, Christ, repeat, the language of the spirit being is the eternal law in which it lives. When a spirit being sends an impulse from itself, from the condensed law, then this impulse is, in turn, the eternal law, and what comes back as answer is likewise the eternal law. The answer enters as information into the spirit being which is ready to receive, and at the same time flows again as all power into the all stream, God, in whom the spirit being moves and lives. Before God, the eternal, created the flowing all being with the spiritual sons, the spiritual worlds and the spirit beings, he moved the entire process of creation within himself, down to the last detail of his work. Then he sent a creation impulse into the energy-filled all. This creation impulse contained the entire sum of all the events of creation. It was and is his will, and, within the all, this impulse was gradually converted into spiritual sons, worlds and beings in accordance with the principle of giving and receiving, which, in God, is a breathing out and in. This means that he sent out into the all. The all received and gradually brought forth what the creation impulse contained. The formations in the all were, in turn, the sending of the all to the creator of the all. Man also calls the first creation impulse of God the first creation thought of God. However, the eternal being, God, has no thoughts. The primordial sensations, which are impulses, are active in him. The creation thought of God was and is, therefore, the creating impulse of God. God thus entered his will into the all and it was. In other words, this means that he sent and received. He sent out his creation impulse, his will, and it was. The divine principle is therefore, giving and receiving, also called sending and receiving. Into the condensed forms of energy, into the spirit beings, God breathed the three filiation characteristics, the patience, which is kindness, selfless love, the filial love, the mercy, which is meekness. These three filiation characteristics came back, in turn, from most of the spirit beings as an affirmation, a gratefulness to the Creator. The Father-Mother principle was thus acknowledged and accepted. As a result, the three filiation characteristics are, in God, the Father-Mother principle. His children should accept and receive them of their own free will, thus showing themselves as children of the Father-Mother God. The Satanic principle, divide, bind and rule, the reversal of the all principle. The first female angel disliked the being which had Tarkenon form. While still in the all stream, as all power, she had been like God. According to the creation impulse, she should be a child of God as the being which had taken on form. However, she wanted to remain omnipresent in the all stream. Since this was not foreseen in the creation impulse, the female angel rebelled against God and did not accept the three filiation characteristics. This resulted in the fall, that is, she fell, thus causing the fall, because she rebelled against the all principle, God, wanting to have her own rulership. As there is only one principle in the whole of infinity, the all-eternal principle of giving and receiving, the first female angel took this all principle and reversed it for her own purposes. She wanted to dominate. She sent out her first domineering impulse to be like God, and entered it into the all. This first negative impulse also contained the refusal to accept the filiation characteristics. By sending this impulse out, the first female angel stimulated in some spirit beings something similar to what she had in herself, the desire to change the creation of God. They, too, rebelled against God and did not accept the filiation to God. Again and again, the female angel entered the same all-like impulses into the all, that is, she emitted. Her impulses were gradually received, that is, taken in, by further spirit beings. Those who let themselves be enticed sent out their consent and joined her. In this way, the fall began to expand, to condense and to take on form. And so, the starting point of the fall was the emitting of the first female angel by wanting to be like God. The first fall being and then other beings who went along with her took over the divine all principle, sending and receiving for their plan. They reversed it for their purposes and from it formed their own negative programs of sending and receiving, which they implanted into all other fallen beings and, later on, into human beings. The eternal all principle is selfless giving and selfless receiving. The person who lives in the all law applies the all principle. He sends impulses from the eternal law and receives in turn from the eternal law, because all is contained in all things. Since every spirit being in God is the all which has taken on form, it possesses infinity as essence in itself. This is the heritage of the children of God received from the eternal. When a spirit being now sends or emits, it emits impulses of the all into the all. What it receives is in turn impulses from the all, the law, God. I, Christ, repeat once more, the spirit being is the all which has taken on form, which moves in the stream of the all. What it emits is the eternal law and what it receives is, in turn, the eternal law, the pure principle. The all principle is the impersonal life. Since every spirit being is the all that has taken on form, it also possesses the entire all. It need not acquire anything for itself personally, it is all in all things. It is the self, the being, it is impersonal, because it is not focused on itself. The eternal all-principle is the law, unite and be. On the other hand, the impure principle says, divide, bind and rule. This satanic principle is the negatively reversed application of the all-principle sending and receiving. The demon's state and its energy suppliers, its accomplices and victims. The demon's state developed over the course of endless periods of time as the result of a continuing break with God. All those who sell themselves to the negative, the satanic principle of divide, bind and rule are under its dominion. By using domination, violence, power, greed, covetousness, envy, enmity and strife, my adversary created his dominion and his territory. It is the hierarchy of the demon's state, which expands downward. From it came and come the promptings which are received by the accomplices and passed on to the victims. The accomplices are people who have leading positions in the world, who want to unscrupulously seize world dominion, whose sole concern is to acquire power and prestige, to dominate, command and govern. So that the accomplices can execute their plans, they need victims, that is, slaves who do what they want. These, too, strive for power and prestige and are willing to pay homage to the accomplices by kicking downward and by sweet talk upward. They imitate the accomplices so that they, too, attain similar things to what the accomplices have acquired on loan from the demons. The person who gets caught in the clutches of the demons and their accomplices is the victim. And so, the person who applies the principle of the adversary which says, divide, bind and rule, that is, sent demonically, this means, negatively, and receive accordingly, gets caught in the clutches of the demons and their accomplices. He is supported by the demons and their accomplices according to his qualifications. He will then succeed in many things and will prosper. He may even climb the rungs of the demonic ladder and reach fame, prestige, power and wealth. Thus, he will become a powerful energy donor for the demon's state. Such a person may even do well until he commits a drastic mistake or until his body has aged and he no longer possesses the flexibility to be used, that is, to be abused by the demons or their accomplices. Then the demons drop their energy donors, their accomplices or victims, whose causes thus become ascetive. They slide back into those ellipses of life in which their causes are registered and stored, and depending on the rhythm of the law of sowing and reaping they will have to endure what is due to be expiated by them as an effect. Often, the causes of such an accomplice or victim have then become more extensive and grave than they were when brought by his soul into this earthly life to begin with. No sending without receiving, the development of the fall realms and of the causal law. I, Christ, repeat, the reversed principle sending and receiving began as follows. The first negative impulse wanting to be like God found resonance in some spirit beings. They sent back the same or similar things. This first negative sending and receiving became the basis for all negativity and for the reversed principle of sending and receiving. The whole law of sowing and reaping, the causal law, was built on this one wrong attitude. The act of sending or emitting against God is the negative seed. The one who accepts what is sent and continues to move it in thoughts, words and deeds sends back the same or similar things. The seed and its corresponding harvest is the result of this. The fall realms emerged from this negative, reversed principle. They consist of parts of spiritual planets which slid downward with the fall beings. In the course of time, the rebellious spirit beings became human beings and the part planets became repository planets. What the fall beings and, in the further course of the fall, the human beings have sown enters first into the respective souls and from the souls into the repository planets whose frequency corresponds to that of the seed. The repository planets form the causal computer and the wheel of reincarnation for those souls that return to incarnation. Thus, the one who emits negativity sows into his soul and, at the same time, enters his seed into the causal computer. From there the correspondences are activated in the soul, and the seed sprouts in the person. He receives what he has sown. There is no sending without receiving. The person who emits simultaneously establishes communication with the corresponding receiver. The person who sends negatively thus establishes communication with the negative, with negative-minded people or with demons or with their accomplices or even with earthbound souls. Everything that is emitted is thus received by a receiver which is attuned to it. That which is received is therefore the same or similar to that which was sent. When such a negative sender is expanded, that is, when a person has many sending stations or programs in his soul, in his consciousness and subconscious, he is also in constant communication with corresponding receivers which, in turn, emit. Thus, it is possible that such a person is controlled from without, he is besieged or possessed. Whether this can happen depends on the attitude of the person, on his world of sensations and thoughts, on what he speaks and what he does, on his wishes, passions, aggressions and claims to power. When such communications flow, demons or earthbound souls make injections, so to speak, or they take possession of the person and control him as they want through his own human tendencies. This means that demons or earthbound souls thus put their desires and their wanting into the communications of the person, thus taking possession of him. When a person enables the negative powers to do this, he is no longer himself, because he is no longer master of himself in much of what he speaks and also does. He is then an accomplice or a victim. Both are energy suppliers of the demon's state. For without the negative energies of people, the demons would have no power. Thought and language substitutes for the loss of spiritual communication. In the eternal being, within the all-principle giving and receiving, there are no thoughts. The beings in God rest and move in the all-stream, God. Their language is the all-word, the law, God, the symphony of the all. When they emit, they give one or more impulses from their all-sensation. These are drops from the all-stream, the ocean, God. The impulse or impulses are then received by the other divine being to which they were sent, and are revealed in it as an absolute image. The spirit being then sees and knows at the same time the content of the impulse, of the drop from the ocean, God, which is the law, God. It is the rhythm, the celestial sound of the all. The all-principle says, enter the word, the sound of the spheres, the all-sensation, the impulse, into the all-law, God, and you receive in turn from the all-law, God. The first fall beings did not know thoughts. These developed only when the fall beings became divided among themselves and started keeping secrets from each other. What they did not want to reveal, but yet existed in sensations, became another frequency, an intermediate communication which opened up between the sensation and the increasingly developing sounds and tones and became thoughts. In the beginning, the first fall beings had only the negative impulse in their negative principle, a sensation which they sent out. As already revealed, in the further course of the fall beings became divided among themselves. With this, they removed their neighbor from their inner being, for they distrusted each other and kept secrets from each other. Out of mistrust and secrecy, more and more so-called secret communications developed. The rebels communicated their secrets only to those whom they trusted. Over the course of the ages, thought, the intermediate vibration between the sensation and the sounds, the tones, developed as a result of the secrets. The fall beings then began to think more and expressed only what they wanted to make known. This resulted in more and more sounds, tones, which steadily increased in number and developed into speech. The fallen being, which was no longer maintained in its neighbor as essence, as selfless love potential, had to be addressed from without, because the inner sending, the spiritual communication, had stopped for the most part. As it was at the beginning of the fall event, it still is today. Man expresses what he wants to say, and in his world of thoughts he conceals what he does not want to communicate, that is, to express, and, in certain cases, he even speaks differently from the way he thinks. Depending on the burdens of the soul, on the programs, more and more layers of subcommunications developed in the fallen beings, since each sensation, each thought and each word is at the same time ascending and receiving. These layers surround the person. They are his thought nets, a network into which he has spun himself and is caught. The thought nets are his small world, which consists of his personal property and of his wanting to be and to have. From this human self-esteem, I am my own neighbor egoism and self-interest developed. The craving to dominate by way of the demon's state knows no limits. People became increasingly influenced by way of the demon's state. A person biased toward the world and spun into his own thought nets no longer thinks of God and of his origin. In his egoism, he forgets the great unity and his spiritual heritage, the being within him. He thinks only of himself, of his well-being and of his material advancement, of property, prestige and power. As a result of this, he divides the earth into parcels and rules over them. The energies of domineering, egocentric people are taken by the demons, who make use of a part of these energies in this world, so that more and more people spin themselves into their thought nets, their subcommunications. The demons have no respect for anything, and the person who lets himself be led astray is like them. He respects neither his neighbor nor his second neighbor, the animal, nor even the plant kingdom. The craving to dominate knows no limits. The materialistic person, spun into his own egocentricity, wants to dominate everything. The person dominates his spouse or mate, his children, his employees and workers. In former times they were his serfs, bondsmen or slaves. The basic rules of the demons, of their accomplices and their victims. Rule 1, wanting to be like God. Rule 2, wanting to conquer the being, God. Rule 3, wanting to possess a realm in which the reversed principle of sending and receiving rules absolutely. Rule 4, wanting to rule. Rule 5, wanting to dominate. Rule 6, wanting to oppress. Rule 7, wanting to completely eliminate God by the abuse of his name. The effects of the demonic satanic principle divide, bind and rule. By way of the satanic principle divide, bind and rule which emerged from the reversal of the all principle, the adversary also stole into the former early communities which came into being after my life on earth as Jesus of Nazareth. He made of them an institution with authorities and subordinates. Such an institution is an externally oriented organization with dogmas, rites and cults. The demons did not even shrink from misusing my name, Christ, for unchristian purposes. They still take it in vain today, thus producing dependents who believe they are doing good and are Christian, and yet they are victims of the demons. Many of the institutional church authorities did not and do not fulfill what I, Christ, commanded of my own as Jesus. They took my teachings and mixed them with their human opinions and teachings. This means, they separated my teachings from me, the Christ, thus establishing their own system of teachings and dogmas. At the same time, they created institutions which administered these doctrines, which introduced rites, ceremonies and cults, issued laws and regulations, thus binding the people in order to rule over them. The person who is servile to this egocentric system of teachings and dogmas, who acknowledges and fulfills the demands of these authorities, is esteemed and favored by them with privileges, titles and rank. These institutionally shaped and dependent people do not actualize the laws of God. For in the institutions, it is not the one who climbs Jacob's ladder of actualization of the divine laws who gains recognition and prestige, but the one who helps the institution gain earthly riches and the authorities to gain power and prestige, and so it is the one who serves their unchristian machinations. The energy suppliers. The earth is the base of the adversary from which he fights against God. It will be his territory for as long as people surrender to his machinations and to the machinations of the accomplices who fulfill his will. Those people who supply energy to the demon state and its top accomplices, so that they in turn can entice more people, are the servile ones and the victims. When accomplices and victims receive energy from the demon state in order to gain material success, prestige and wealth in this world, they have to deliver energy to the demon state in return for this support. This is in accordance with the guiding principle of the demons and their accomplices: if you give to me, then I give to you. This payment is the energies of those people who think, speak and act negatively, every day, who quarrel among themselves, who approach each other spitefully, who belittle their neighbor in order to aggrandize themselves, who put themselves above their neighbor through arrogance or authority mania, who foster wars or wage wars and fights of all kinds, who violate, slaughter and consume animals, thus increasing their own aggressions which, at the appropriate time, are then worked off with quarreling or fighting. All these people are the energy suppliers for the demon state and its accomplices. The 7 laws or principles of the demon state. The first demonic principle: create disorder, noise, structures of power and outer forms. The adversary has also reversed the 7 basic POWers of God for himself and his purposes: order, will, wisdom, earnestness, patience, love and mercy. With this, he wants to set up his own domain and abolish the kingdom of God. Correspondingly, the reversed principle of the demon state, of its accomplices and victims, also has 7 laws or principles. The first principle of the demons reads: create disorder, in people as well as on earth, so that God can no longer be perceived by people. Make noise, so that man will orient himself more and more externally and forget God, the innermost. Create institutions and high officials, who put themselves over the people and govern, who allow themselves to be respected and honored as rulers and gods. Create many ceremonies and rituals, so that man will always have reason to submit to outer rites and ceremonies, having to constantly be on guard so as not to forget any rite or any ceremony. Therefore, he stays turned without. Recruit accomplices, so that the demonic structure will expand. This is how the demon state created its sphere of influence on earth, with its direct and indirect accomplices and its victims. It gives the power to rule to its direct and indirect accomplices, according to their abilities and the degree of their externalization. These rule over those people who bow to the darkness, to the negative, and who allow themselves to be subjugated. The demon state succeeds in doing this with many people. In the name of God, the Most High, the critics who denounce this form of regime are given a bad conscience under threat of punishment of hell and eternal damnation. Out of fear, more and more people become victims, slaves and thus yes men. So that people would turn to the outer more and forget the innermost being, the stillness, the sublime, the being, God. A rigid system of outer forms was created. It is a system of sacred observances with compulsory robes and movements, requiring a certain behavior from the victims. By carrying out such outer forms, many people are distracted and separated from their innermost being, the true life, the eternal being. From infancy on, the children of the victims are already programmed accordingly, with baptism, rituals and teachings, raised to be victims, so that as adults they will join the ranks of the like-minded. If a victim develops certain abilities and emits massive material wishes, and if this person has the strength to dominate his neighbor, to subjugate him and perhaps enslave him, then he will be made an accomplice. For the accomplices ally with those of like mind again and again, in order to find more victims and raise, in turn, able victims to be accomplices. The accomplices impose laws on the victims, under which the victims often have to suffer severely, and under whose pressure they then have to think, speak and act. The accomplices turned many of the victims into serfs and slaves who had to do hard, even the most difficult, work for them. Others have to fulfill the most difficult obligations in order to meet the demanded requirements. In spite of the greatest efforts by the demons, God cannot be defeated, for the adversary cannot penetrate the kingdom of God, because his radiation, that is, his consciousness, does not reach so far. On the other hand, the radiation of God, the unlimited life, penetrates everything that is including matter and the spheres of influence of the adversary. The causal clock, the principle of God that has been reversed into its opposite, is still ticking, but with the rebellion of the negative principle, it received other numerals and a higher speed. And so, the causal clock, the wheel of reincarnation, is turning faster and faster. Conditions on the earth are worsening, people are becoming more ill, more aggressive and more power-hungry. The screw, the human ego, is turning right out of its own thread. For this reason, the causal clock which runs for the incarnation of base souls will stop one day. Then, this nightmare will be over. Recognize, through all these externalizations, people are distracted from God more and more. Some institutions and governments of this world abuse the name of the Eternal and mine, Christ, in order to bind the victims to the accomplices. From the constraint imposed on people often by force and under threat of severest punishment, hatred grows against the oppressors. Envy and enmity grow out of this hatred. Envy, which is a root of the world of one's human sensations, thoughts and wishes, still produces shoots. Everyone wishes and desires the same or similar things as the so-called powerful, the rich and the distinguished ones. These demands push man to climb higher and higher on the ladder to success, the ladder of wanting to be, to possess and to have. Through all these negative waves of energy, unimaginably great concentrated powers of negative energy are formed. These negative energies, which rise like clouds from the earth, are taken by the demon's state in return for rendering its services, thus expanding its territory on this earth. This means that it takes the energies of the accomplices and victims and uses a part of them to incite senders, that is, people who feel, think, speak and act negatively to more offenses. With this, it entices them into ever graver causes. The demons may also apply the same energies again to the energy suppliers, in order to kindle even more what is already taking place in and around them, like, for example, spite, envy, animosity and strife. They steer their accomplices and victims in such a way that these always feel, think, speak and do the same or the like. Thus, the principle of sending and receiving is maintained and extended. Through the reversed principle of sending and receiving, negative communications flow uninterruptedly. The network of these countless communication lines goes as follows. Negative energies flow from the demon's state to the accomplices, from the accomplices to their victims, from the victims to other people who think, live and strive in a similar way. Communications flow, in turn, from the accomplices and victims, to energy fields and souls and to the demon's state. Out of this develops what for man is an unimaginably tremendous negative energy potential, triggered by countless negatively oriented people. This is used, in turn, by the demon's state for further enticements. In the flow of these communications, the demons undertake so-called injections, that is, they fortify these communications with the negative energies that they took from their accomplices and victims. By means of injections into the subcommunications, they fortify the negative world of sensations and thoughts of the individual. Thus, they encourage their accomplices and victims to feel, to think and to speak the same or the like again and again, and to behave accordingly. But it is always the energies of such people who, through their negative behavior, make themselves available, that is, they deliver themselves up as accomplices and victims, and thus energy can be drawn from them. I, Christ, repeat, the demons would have no energy of their own to entice people, if they did not have energy suppliers at their disposal, that is, people who, without examining their thoughts, blindly apply the negative principle of sending and receiving. The demons also stimulate the individual's world of desires, in order to encourage his passions. Or they stimulate thoughts of envy, letting them turn into hatred and enmity. They enter thoughts of destruction, of plundering, of war and devastation into the already agitated minds of the people. All of this first begins with injections into the negative subcommunications, into the individual's world of sensations, thoughts and desires, into the passions, the communications of envy and hatred. In this way, the demon's state created for itself a mighty source of energy on the earth through all those people who serve the demons knowingly or unknowingly, either directly as accomplices or indirectly as victims. Thus, it created disorder in the world and among people, in the institutions and governments, in enterprises, at work, in the families, among relatives and in the circles of friends. People distanced themselves more and more from each other, they became alienated from one another. Through this, the Lord and the servant, the ruler and the subordinate, came into being. The second demonic principle. Promote self-will and discord among the people. With injections into the negative subcommunications of people, into their world of sensations and thoughts, the demons stimulate egoism. Earthbound souls, too, influence people in this way. This results in dissension and discord among the accomplices, who have been provided with honors, names, titles and means by the demons. The demon wants discord, through which power struggles emerge. A power struggle among the accomplices is a power struggle of giants. Each one wants to be still greater, to acquire still more prestige, to bear still more honors, and to be given still more titles. And so, each one wants to be the greatest, and each one wants to rule over all the others. Thus, one rises against the other, for each one wants to subjugate and dominate all the others, since every one is against every other one. The unscrupulous and violent one, the one without a conscience, who is capable of forcing his neighbor under his domination, will be supplied with still more energy by the demons. This means that the more egocentric and brutal the person is, the better use he is to the demon's state. The weaker ones will be enticed and steered also by way of their subcommunications, in such a way that they bind themselves to the accomplices, let themselves be coerced by them, thus joining the ranks of the victims. The demon's state knows how to control its own. It allows the great ones of this world to pass on to each other the good and desirable things, the big pieces, such as land, money and goods. Even if they are divided among themselves, the demon's state knows how to control them. For a considerable part of the great cake called earth, they fulfill their demonic obligation, the will of the demon's state. So that the gears of negativity mesh well, the victims are also used accordingly, they give their services, often blindly. In order to gain more and more prestige and power, the accomplices step all over the victims, and induce them to more offenses, for example, by giving them promises which they do not keep, or paying them lip service, while thinking and acting differently. Demons and accomplices always strive toward the one goal, to gain energy, to acquire prestige and power, in order to maintain and expand their territory, their sphere of influence on earth. In the course of this exploitation of people and of the earth, the gap between the accomplices, between the rich and high-ranking people of the earth, and the victims becomes ever greater. As a result, envy grows in the victims, because they want to live in the same or like way as the high-ranking, the distinguished and the rich. The victims likewise want possessions, prestige and wealth. They also want a piece of land from the great cake earth so that they can set up their house, their parcel, their property on it like the great and the rich. In order to attain what is in their world of desires, they work for the powerful of this world. They work as subordinates to their superiors. They cower and, in turn, step on others in order to attain the object of their entire longing and confirm themselves, a piece of earth. In order to build their own nest, to gain their own property, they save and do without. The little ego wants more and more. Therefore, it imitates its idols, the distinguished and rich of this world. Few of those who are oriented towards the world know about inner values. For many, the whole reason of life is to gain outer things. Pleasure and lust are close together, especially when it concerns winning the wife or husband of one's neighbor or having several men or women for oneself simultaneously. These are then kept in bondage for the benefit of one's body. All this increases egotism and willfulness, which is binding. This means that what belongs to me is mine, and I tie it to myself using every means and possibility available. However, it also forces me to defend it, even with battle cries and weapons. The victims, too, were infected by this. They do the same. People tie themselves to people according to the principle, this is mine and that is thine. People bind themselves to money and goods, to the acquired piece of land according to the principle, this is mine and that is thine. These bindings to people and things lead to resentment, envy, strife and hatred. In this way, dissension builds up again and again, which can even lead to wars. In hostility and strife, much is felt, thought and spoken negatively, that is, negativity is sent and received in return. Through this, further negative sub-communications emerge, which, in turn, offer themselves to becoming injected. The intention has always been that the person who rules the material world should receive adequate energy in order to introduce new possibilities for enticing people more and more, thus maintaining and expanding his territory. And so, the accomplices and the victims are thus the sources of energy for the demons. The disorder in and around the person, the strife in marriage and between couples, in the family and at work, as well as among nations, supply the corresponding negative energies. In the same way, excesses foster willfulness through desires, through passions, through wanting to possess, to be and to have, thus setting free more and more negative energies. With many people, the demons have accomplished what they wanted. Many created for themselves their little world, which consists of human sensations, thoughts, words and deeds, of desires, longings and passions, of stubbornness, envy, strife, hatred and enmity. Each one has spun himself into his little ego world and only circles around himself, in his own world of thoughts and wishes. He thinks only of and for himself. He wants everything only for himself. He works only for himself and, in the end, also speaks only himself. This is then his little, base, ego world. Spun into this negative cocoon, such a person lives and just ekes out his existence. In this, he has forgotten his neighbor, his fellow man, unless this one is to render services to him, that is, do for him what he, himself, does not want to do. If his neighbor is not willing, he is insulted, put down and, in the end, forgotten. The one who makes demands is interested in his neighbor only as long as the latter fulfills his will, otherwise, he is hardly noticed. This is how the principle of the demons, divide, bind and rule works. The arrangement of the four realms. In the beginning of these activities, that is, in the beginning of the fall beings did not recognize that through their negative behavior each soul and each human being would one day create his own world for himself. They also did not realize that, in the end, the sum of all wrong behavior would result in a mighty causal computer, which is made up of the four planes of purification. The four planes of purification are followed by the three planes of unfoldment. They are the spheres of preparation to the absoluteness. As in heaven, so is it outside of the eternal being, too, each plane is contained in the other. Therefore, 7 times 7 planes exist outside of the eternal being, the absoluteness. They include countless coarse material stars and countless different types of vibration of fine material stars which, however, do not yet have the absolute degree of vibration of the heavens. The causal computer, the four planes of purification, stores everything negative that takes place on earth and in each individual person. I, Christ, repeat for better understanding. The eternal being consists of 7 times 7 heavens, the 4 realms of 7 times 7 planes. They are the 4 planes of purification and the 3 planes of preparation, and in each plane all others are contained as a subregion. The planes of purification are order, will, wisdom and earnestness, and the 3 planes of unfoldment are patience, love and mercy. The discarnate souls live in the 4 planes of purification. According to its degree of burdening, a soul is attracted by that plane and planet which correspond to the respective vibration of the soul, because like always attracts like again and again. The spiritually developed souls live in the 3 planes of preparation to absoluteness. There, they learn to be able to apply the law of love again in a comprehensive way. Recognize, the one who does not fulfill the will of God lives in willfulness and fulfills the will of the demons. The third demonic principle. Forget ethical principles, strive for knowledge, make the earth subject to you. The third principle of the demons says, strive for intellectual knowledge, for the intellect. Forget feelings and ethical principles. School your intellect, so that your life will be successful. Pay attention only to the outer, for there is only matter. Man's inner being, too, consists only of nerves, muscles, bones, tendons, ligaments, blood vessels, organs, and so, all in all, of cells. For the world-oriented person, only what is to be seen, weighed and measured counts. The demons are ingenious, they inspire, and their accomplices and victims dance. They dance around the golden calf, the human ego. They strive for money, property and prestige. Other injections of the demons into the subcommunications of people say, you will acquire money, property and prestige most quickly, if, for the benefit of mankind, you study, analyze and improve the external things which your ancestors have already explored and dug up as an earthly treasure. The servile obey. They believe that they are thinking themselves, yet it is thought through them. All this requires energy. The demons have input the idea to make the earth subject to you, and the servile obey. Even the victims, who still think in terms of small parcels, have their ambition and likewise aim high. They want to do the same as the so-called great ones. Often, Therefore, at least one member of the family has to go to college, so that he will be the pride of the family. The servile began to research, to study, to analyze, and they had their success. For what was once the ox-drawn and horse-drawn carriage is now the so-called train, the automobile, the airplane and the ocean liner. The demons input the idea and many people obey. In order to do credit to your ancestors and also to yourself, go to places of learning, so-called universities. Acquire the basic intellectual knowledge and technical know-how, so that you become an inventor, a scientist, a theologian or much more, a head thinker, who is able to analyze everything in order to discover the deepest mysteries of the earth and of the universe. Then make the earth subject to you. Discover and explore the other mysteries of the earth and its still hidden treasures, and invent the necessary machines to dig up and transport the treasures. Thus, drilling rigs and large conveyor systems were developed to dig up the treasures of the earth, the natural resources. Big manufacturing plants, that is, factories, developed where the mineral resources are manufactured into many unlawful things. Nuclear power plants and incineration plants developed. For that, big machinery complexes and the corresponding amounts of raw materials and energy were needed. So the idea came from the sources of energy of the demons that one could also conquer the stars and make the universe subject to oneself. The inventors and the scientists once more began to dance around the golden calf and around the demons who supplied the impulses and the energies for this. And so, airplanes and missiles, satellites, space shuttles and space stations developed. Extensive research centers developed where those who cling to the world continue to strain their brain cells and program their minds with concepts, in order to take the next steps toward conquering the universe. The demons input these ideas and much more, and people fall for it. Even the victims are excited about the achievements of the inventors and scientists and zealously make their financial contribution, so that the intellectuals, the head thinkers, can expand their works. The head thinkers become respected and rich and are honored by people and even praised as benefactors of mankind. They do research and are always inventing something new which should make life on earth more comfortable and beautiful. At the same time they are inventing means of warfare with which life on earth can be destroyed. And so, the demons seek their corresponding tools among the people and enter into them the reversed principle which is against God. Be intellectual and strive towards outer things, instead of being wise, prudent and turned within. In all this, the principle of God is reversed. God spoke to his own. Make the earth subject to you, and he, the great All-One, meant, respect and treasure the life of the earth, for it is a living organism, which nourishes you, O man. Respect and treasure the life in and on the earth, for the animals, the plants and the minerals want to serve you, the noble, the pure, in you. For this reason, before and with the great organism earth. Every form of life senses and feels, and you bear in you the essence of all forms, of all being. And so, respect the mighty organism earth and, as a human being, you will possess everything you need and things will go well for you on earth. This is the principle of God. The following words of God were also reversed by the demons. God speaks to his own. The wealth of infinity, the fullness of the all, is in your innermost being. When your soul has attained the degree of purity of the inner life, then it radiates purity, richness and fullness. Then you will possess everything you need on earth, however, not only for your personal well-being, but for the good of all, because you are a child of infinity and heir to all being. You need nothing for your self-interest. In order to affirm your base ego, you possess everything, because you are all in all things. The demon speaks and thereby uses the truth, the words of the Eternal. God wants you to be rich and respected, to live in the fullness and to prosper. Therefore, enter your desires as pictures, wealth, prestige, power and well-being. The more you can get for yourself personally from the great cake, earth, the better things will go for you. Just as you input, that is, as you emit, so will you also receive. Emit and emit again, and intensify your desires in your sensations and thoughts. The world of desires that you carry in your sensations and thoughts will be fulfilled for you. I will give it to you, because it is due to you, since you are a child of the All. I, Christ, explain, the one who lets himself be enticed in this and similar ways will receive from the demon's state what he emits and what he bears in his sensations and thoughts, but through this, he will become servile and dependent. These injections take place almost imperceptibly, for the demon speaks sweetly but thinks only of himself. I will give you all the treasures of this world, if you fall at my feet and adore me as God and giver. God is the impersonal God and also gives impersonality to his own, that is, according to the degree of purity of the soul. However, he does not give to an individual person for his self-interest's sake, but, through him, to all others, impersonally. Each one receives from God as much as he is able to take in and pass on, in accordance with his open spiritual consciousness. No person is allowed to tie wealth, money and property to himself. That is demonic and not divine. One cannot study God. The demons exploit even the longing of the still alert soul. And so, into those people who seek God with their intellect, the demons enter the notion that, for example, they have to study God. Many a person believes that by studying theology he can fathom God and experience who he truly is. God cannot be studied. Therefore, the question becomes, which God is studied? Not the eternal, all-kind and wise Father, the creator of heaven and earth, the eternal Father who does not encourage his children to study him and to learn what people have thought up about him with their concepts for 2,000 years. He wants to guide his children to stillness and to turning within, to prudence and to selfless love, to order and to selfless will, to divine wisdom and to the being, which is in all things, and thus to the unity with all men, animals, plants and minerals, yes, with the entire all. God speaks to his own, be the wisdom out of me. May the greatest among you be the least. God speaks to his own, equip yourself with virtue and with divine ethics and morals, and be a brother, a sister, among brothers and sisters. God speaks to his own, live with nature, and you live in me, and things will truly go well for you on earth and also as a soul beyond the earth. God speaks to his own, after this earthly existence, you will enter heaven, the being in me, God, according to your spiritual unfoldment. What do these words of the eternal have to do with theology? God cannot be explored and studied. What is studied is never God, but corresponds to the reversed principle, wanting to be like God or wanting to be his representative or substitute. The truly wise one is not the intellectual, instead, truly wise is the one who rests in God. God cannot be studied, he can only be experienced. The person who wants to experience God, the eternal, has to walk the path through self-recognition to the God experience. These steps take place from without to within. And the one who wants to follow the Good Shepherd has to distance himself from the frenzied why of this world and to go within, seeing himself as a temple of God. And the one who keeps his own temple pure needs no outer temple, nor dogmas, rites or ceremonies. He dwells in the innermost sanctum, in God, and will also be guided by God. His sensations are noble and pure, his thoughts enter more and more into the stream of God and become pearls in the ocean, God, which are then his impulses, his words. The fourth demonic principle. Be unyielding, keep the upper hand, defend your ego with stubbornness. The fourth principle of the demons says, be unyielding, keep the upper hand, defend your ego with stubbornness. The demon emits into his territory and his own receive and obey. Impose your wishes and your will forcibly and harshly, and be aware that what you have studied and acquired throughout the years is the truth. Therefore, remain consistent towards your fellow man, for you know better. Stand up for your interests and fight, if possible with weapons, to defend yourself and your personal possessions. Fight against all your enemies, and when you think your fatherland is threatened, go to war to defend it, too. But with fatherland the demon means the territory of the darkness. Recognize, whoever lends his ear and his mouth to the adversary for a long time, perhaps over years, delivers himself up to him and becomes a tool of the darkness. The more often the person is beside himself through aggressions, through passions and passionate desires, or is dominated by arrogance, by the rejection of his neighbor or by his need for recognition and the drive to possess, the more quickly he will be besieged or possessed by base, earthbound souls. Such a person is then no longer himself. It is then no longer his soul which acts through him, it is then other souls, earthbound souls, in whom perhaps demonic traits are effective. They penetrate the person and they go in and out of him, of his house, just as they please. Thus, the person has become the plaything of the negative powers. He is then influenced through his world of sensations, thoughts and wishes, through his arrogance, his spite, his passions, through envy, enmity and strife, through what has not been cleared up with his neighbor. These communications are then influenced or possessed by souls. In the course of the fall event the base ego got and gets carried away. The one who is beside himself is no longer in himself, and the one who is beside himself opens his house, his body, for other forces. Driven by the hunger for power and ambition, by envy, greed and the wanting to be and to have, many therefore fight in order to gain prestige, wealth and power. Thus, many people who are no longer masters of themselves reach the top of a nation. Many of them are actually convinced they are doing good, even when they call to war against other nations, invade neighboring nations, plunder them, take people prisoners, inflict punishment on them or even murder them, with cries of war accusing them of being their enemies. Power-hungry people of another category are still taking the right to Christianize their fellow men by force, or, with the baptism of a newborn, to forcefully imprint the stamp of a church institution, with everything associated with it. Many of these blinded leaders, who are at the top of nations or religious institutions, do not shy away from talking about peace in order to assert their warlike intentions. This loud noise about peace is dangerous, when man has peace neither in his inner being nor in his surroundings, when he lives in discord with his fellow men, yes, with whole nations. For then he has something else in mind, or those who possess him plan to do something else through him. The demons give further impulses to their accomplices and victims. You must push through your intentions stubbornly and consistently and tie your fellow men down with obligations through so-called rental and leasing contracts and the like for many years. Only in this way will you create security for yourself and for your family, too. Recognize, the demon's state will rule its servile ones until these renounce it through self-recognition or until the accomplices and the victims are prompted to reflection by means of an illness or a blow of fate. When the accomplice or the victim has become unproductive or the abused human body has fallen victim to an illness, then the demon's state gives this person no more energy. It abandons him to his fate. In so doing, it does not consider the fact that its accomplices or victims once served it. There are many tools of the darkness. When the physical body of one of these tools passes away, the soul still belongs to the demon's state for the time being. For the latter had helped the former human being to attain power, prestige, fame, wealth or success, This means for the soul that it is in the hands of the demons and their accomplices. One of the many rules of the demon's state says, I have lent you energy, now give it back to me, by working for me in a future incarnation. A soul which clings to the world and is bound to the demon's state is then directed by the demons to another incarnation with a certain satanic assignment. The person then has to carry out this assignment in this world, starting from the age in which he is able to distinguish between good and evil. He is then a tool of the darkness and has to serve the demons 20, 30, 40 or even more earthly years, if he does not uncompromisingly turn back and does not transform again the satanic principle, divide, bind and rule with my power, the power of Christ. When the person turns to me, Christ, he gradually reaches the inner path to the true life, and applies the eternal principle, unite and be. The demon's state and its accomplices do not respect the divine principles of kindness, forbearance and patience. The fifth demonic principle. Be discontent, stay hectic, drive yourself and others to overactivity, see the bad side of your fellow man. The fifth principle of the demons says, be constantly discontent, be hectic, chase and persecute your fellow man with negative sensations and thoughts. Drive them persistently to overactivity, so that they, too, remain under permanent tension, in hectic activity and stress and are impatient with their fellow man as well. The demons send their impulses into this world and those servile to them obey. Drive yourself to overactivity, as well as your subordinates, and all those whom you have bound to yourself, for the time is limited in which you can acquire what you consider desirable now and for your old age. If you have acquired enough for yourself personally, then, in your old age, you can also safely enjoy what you have created for yourself. The demons emit into this world, and many obey. Look only at the bad side of your fellow man, for they all are up to only one thing, to oppress you, exploit you and perhaps rob you of your hard-earned possessions. Therefore, do not tolerate the weakness of kindness, forbearance and patience. So don't be a weakling, but be manful, fight for your advantage and the prestige of your person. The demons continue to emit, and when a credulous person who lives kindness, forbearance and patience crosses your path, treat him with your schooled and polished mind, by speaking sweetly and thinking sourly in order to deceive him, for he does not know or hear or see your thoughts. The intensified irradiation of the primordial central sun. An act of grace of God. Recognize that my adversary works with such and similar methods. But the arms of the Eternal Father, and also my arms, those of the Christ, reach farther. They reach into this world in order to lead out all those of goodwill. But the arms of the demons do not reach into the heavens, nor into the planes of preparation, where the spiritually unfolded souls live in order to prepare themselves for the heavens, for the eternal being. The arms of the demons still reach into the third and fourth planes of purification here and there, but no farther. The 4 planes of purification form the wheel of reincarnation. The demons have their arms in its spokes. However, their grip on souls and men will be very gradually denied to them, because the earth is cleansing itself of the negative, of the demonic principle. As a result of this, ever fewer heavily burdened souls will be able to incarnate. Since the primordial power irradiates more strongly, the wheel of reincarnation is still turning very quickly, in order to give the many heavily and most heavily burdened souls the opportunity to more quickly cleanse themselves as human beings. This, in turn, is an act of grace of the Eternal for his children, whether they are demons, accomplices or victims. This more intensive irradiation of the primordial power and the fast-turning wheel of reincarnation enable the souls and the human beings, including the demons, to turn back to God in a short time. However, For the demon's state, this means that it can operate only in a limited way to control its accomplices and victims. Through the fast-turning wheel of reincarnation, the causes become effective in short cycles. This is why more and more people fall ill. Through illness and suffering, many a person comes to his senses and is prompted to change his way of thinking and living. This intensified irradiation of the primordial central sun allows more and more men and souls to awaken to a spiritual, divine life. They recognize that they have to break with the adversary through a life that is pleasing to God and through the fulfillment of the 7 basic powers of the law of God, from order to mercy. Therefore, more and more people walk the path within. With my power, the Christ power, they endeavor to again change back the reversed 7 basic principles, in order to come nearer to the source, to the 7 basic powers of the heavens. Very gradually, the pilgrims on the inner path discontinue the negative sending and therefore no longer receive the satanic. The materialistic world thinks it is approaching its culmination point, the unification of all nations. But this gigantic outrage of the darkness is just a last attempt to get the world ship back on its course. This undertaking concerns external things and is not based on the inner foundation, the basis of inner peace and of true togetherness. But meanwhile, the causal computer irradiates the data, the causes, and the wheel of reincarnation leads yet many to incarnation, who find their way to self-recognition and a turning back. This stronger irradiation of the primordial power is the kindness, the gentleness, the love and the patience of the eternal in me, the Christ, in order to enable all souls and men to turn back into the freedom and beauty of God right up to the last moment. The love, goodness, forbearance and patience of God are without limit. Everything pure gives itself and bows in love to the still impure, so that it may become pure, selfless and kind and may find its way back to its origin, to the selfless love. The 6th demonic principle, self-love brings happiness. The 6th principle of the demons says, self-love brings you a feeling of well-being and happiness. The more you are loved by people in a personal way, the happier you become. The demons emit the following impulses into this world. Self-love should be your strongest personal desire magnet. With it you tie the people whom you attract to yourself. They then love you in the way you want. In physical union you find what you need, love. In your sexual love life, you attain the climax of love. The more you intensify the physical love, the happier you will become. Do not believe the emotional people who speak of a selfless love. The love that gives itself selflessly is deceptive. Only the weak fall for it. Therefore, don't be a weakling. Help yourself to love, you need it for your earthly well-being. With their injections into the subcommunications of disorder, self-will, intellect, self-aggrandizement, impotence, stress, hostility, hatred or envy, the demons stretch man's nervous system like a bow. In every failure of a person, the demon intensifies the fears of failure, and in every victory over one of his fellow men, he strengthens the feelings of greatness, heroism, bravery and pride. Whether a weakness or apparent strength in a person, whether victory, heroism or hostility, strife, stress, envy or belittlement, the demon takes advantage of everything to stretch man's nervous system to more and more, so that he relaxes more and more frequently in lust. Among other things, this leads to egoistic physical love. The man takes a woman to gratify his lusts and the woman takes a man to gratify her lusts. They then call this gratification love. This egoistic love degenerates in turn into wanting to possess, to be and to have. Egoistic love may be very sweet, because the person attains what serves his egoistic love, his ego love. Many people crave being confirmed and being dependent on their fellow man. The person who fulfills their wish is loved by them as far as their ego love is capable. They tell the person what he wants to hear and do what he demands of them. This is the egoistic love, or love as an end in itself, but not selfless love, God's love. What kind of love is it that seeks only its kind and casts out all those who do not selfishly blow on the horn of self-love? This can never be the love of God and of neighbor, but again the reversed principle: if you love me, I will love you. If you do not love me, I will not love you either. Then you are uninteresting to me, you can go. The one who does not pay tribute to the self-love of his fellow man comes automatically before the tribunal of the human ego, with sensations, thoughts and words. This neighbor is then judged, put down and cast out. This is self-love, selfishness, which knows no mercy nor meekness. It knows no tolerance, no understanding and no benevolence either. In the sequence from disorder, via self-will, intellect, hard-heartedness, impatience and self-love, the seventh basic power of God was also reversed. The seventh demonic principle: be without mercy, kill and murder for your rights. The one who keeps his right is stronger. The seventh principle of the demons says: be without mercy and unyielding with people, animals, plants and minerals. Be and remain a butcher and avenger. Kill, murder for your rights, for you should have your right. The demons emit, and the accomplices and their victims receive. Justice is weakness. The just one is lenient and therefore the weaker one and a weakling. For this reason, right before justice. Be unmerciful, be unyielding, be a know-it-all, then you are the stronger one. For this reason, kill people and animals for the right cause. Kill others in war when they attack you with a weapon, and sacrifice them first, before they make a victim of you. Recognize, in reality, the person who thinks and acts in this way has already been a victim for a long time, for he is the favorite child of the demons and their accomplices. Such a person does not hesitate to sacrifice animals, for he, the unfree victim, does not respect the freedom of all those who cross his path either. He crosses swords not only with people like him, but uses the sword on innocent animals, too. He kills them and he enriches himself with their cadavers, which he sells for consumption or from which he prepares for himself a good cadaver meal. In manifold ways, he exploits nature and also kills it. In this way, he has made the earth infertile to a large extent. Everything that does not seem useful to him any longer he leaves thoughtlessly on the ground. Toxic chemicals and nuclear waste are also fed into the waters. Exhaust fumes from vehicles and factories pollute the atmosphere. The demons and their accomplices have explained the mercy of the Samaritan in the following way: among the countless hospitals of this world, they also established ones in which people are treated like machines. This is where they deliver their ill, and when a demon is incarnated, also themselves. The doctors see to it that the sick body is restored. After it is repaired, the person will continue to sin, because the fact that all causes of illness lie in the soul is seldom thought about. In reality, illness should be a means for slowing down the person. He should be prompted to stop and think and be moved to change his way of thinking and acting. But many doctors have only a scalpel for their neighbor, and so, what happens on some operating tables is similar to what happens on slaughtering tables, where animals are prepared for consumption, or in a laboratory where animals serve as experimental objects. On the operating table, what seems to be ill or has seemingly led to the illness is cut out of the patient, depending on the symptoms. The difference between the animal on the slaughtering table and the person on the operating table is that the person is stitched back up again and kept alive if possible and is not consumed like the animal. Yet not only the animal, but in a figurative sense also the person is consumed. The consumption of the person continues in other ways, depending on the illness. Because the cause of the illness in the soul was not removed, the illness continues to drain the person and it finally consumes him. When the person, the covering of flesh, has passed away, neither the operation nor the medicines have helped. Since the physicians did not learn in their studies that the causes of all illness lie in the soul, they could not really help the patient, despite the operation and medicine. In reality, the patient received only the professional knowledge of the physician, which the latter had acquired in his medical studies and perhaps broadened with some professional experience. The decayable shell is buried. In time, what used to exist disappears from daily life, the former person is forgotten. Christ alone leads soul and man out of the law of sowing and reaping and out of the clutches of the adversary. But where does his immortal soul go? It is in that place by which it was attracted according to its state of consciousness. The person has thus chosen this place himself, he predetermined the destination of his soul through his feeling, thinking, speaking and acting. There it lives and from there it comes back into an earthly garment if it cleared up only little as a soul in the soul realms. Where then will the incarnated soul, the new human being, be? The soul may go back to the family in which it lived once as a human being. Or it may incarnate at a later time and is then possibly the child of one of its former children. What was not paid off has to be paid off. What was not removed has to be removed. What was not recognized has to be recognized. And what has not been atoned for, has to be suffered through. The wheel of reincarnation turns and brings the souls to incarnation. As human beings, they will again be where they still have to recognize and clear up their causes. And so, they go back to those families and to those people with whom they have to clear up some things. They may also return to old ruins where they once caused atrocities. Or they may go to those places where they once cruelly killed animals. Or they may go to those places where the soil now lies fallow, but was once fertile land which, in previous incarnations, they made infertile. There, they will then starve and live in need and will perhaps have to beg for bread from those people to whom they once denied bread and whom they dispossessed of their land. The law of sowing and reaping acts in manifold ways, and each one receives what he, himself, has input. The path to happiness and inner contentment is, recognize yourself and turn back. Only I, Christ, am the way, the truth and the life. No one comes to the true God, our eternal Father, but through me, Christ, the Redeemer of all souls and men, the ruler of the kingdom of God on earth. The hours of the demons, of their accomplices and victims are numbered. I, Christ, expose the workings of the demon's state and its accomplices more and more. I lead all those who have fallen victim to them and who let themselves be rescued from the clutches of the principal divide, bind and rule. I teach people to turn back and to turn within, so that they recognize themselves again as the temple of God, in which the Spirit of the Eternal dwells. Then there will be no need anymore for external things like dogmas, ceremonies, rites and cults. There will also be no need anymore for cathedrals and temples fitted out with gold and precious things. The one who hears my words and fulfills them becomes again the temple of the One, the Holy One, and will rest in God again, because he has become the law of God. The one who fulfills the laws of the One, the principle unite and be is again one with his neighbor and with the world of the animals, the plants and minerals. All those who live in God make the earth subject to them in love and will possess the earth in love, for they are the peace-loving ones. Then the adversary will be bound and the wheel of reincarnation will stand still for heavily burdened souls. It will then accompany only light-filled souls to the earth to incarnation. In the earthly garment, they will preserve unity and brotherliness. There will no longer be differences of rank among people. Then, on earth, the one, the absolute, principle of the heavens will exist, unite, and before you are the being, the law of selfless love. I, Christ, am then the leader of the people and their brother and ruler of the kingdom of God on earth, and there will be peace. On the other hand, in the spheres of purification, it will continue as it once was on earth. However, the demons will have no influence on the souls anymore, because the earth, their territory, will have slipped out of their hands and, for the time being, they will no longer be able to send their tools there. Thus, until the end of the kingdom of peace, their sources of energy and their tools will be taken from them, for there will be no people from whom they can draw energy or who let themselves be misused as tools by the demons until the kingdom of peace, the kingdom of God on earth, comes to an end. Through the kindness, love and mercy of God, the souls in the spheres of purification, like the people of goodwill in the past, will be led to recognition of God and to the filiation in God, through self-recognition, and the purging and purification of the soul. Starting from the earth, the fall will come to an end, even though the satanic will flare up once more for a short time, after the kingdom of peace of Jesus Christ, which is also called the 1,000-year kingdom of God. After the home-bringing of all souls into the kingdom of God, all will then be reunited in God who was and is and will be eternally, the just all one, God, the Father of all his children. Alpha and Omega in me, the Christ. Alpha and being eternally in God and in me, the Christ. The co-regent of the heavens, eternally in all eternity.